Hey guys, how's it going? It's girl Liz. I just wanted to talk and tell you guys that I think emulation is a way to save gaming. And a lot of people can argue with me that, oh, you're doing a bad thing by emulating games. And a lot of emulator owners that have created emulators like the PSX2 community, the RPCX3, I think whatever the fucking PlayStation 3 one is, legitimately say that you should rip your own games. And I'm like, well, not everybody can afford or still have their collection of PlayStation 3 games. So emulation is the best way, and you freaking go against people say, oh, piracy's bad. It's technically not piracy, and it's technically not illegal if someone is willing to rip their games from their own disc and put it up on the public for everybody to access. It's technically not stealing if they legitimately do it. They're like, you know what? I'm going to share this game that I love with the community. If they rip their legitimate copy to share with people, it's that technically not stealing. And emulation is the greatest way to preserve games. And not a lot of people in a lot of countries can afford this shit. A lot of people have to rely on emulation to play, game consoles like PlayStation 3 and everything else. And what makes me happy about emulation is that it runs better than the original console because you have more settings to fuck with than everything else. So people can argue with me that emulation's a terrible thing. No, it isn't. It legitimately saves time, money, and a lot of people's, stress of, searching and spending ungodly amounts of money on games for past gen consoles that either the games are no longer in the store or backwards compatible, or you can't find them. I look at this as emulation is saving the old ways of gaming so people can experience stuff. And half of the games that I have in my library, I can emulate, but I don't have a disk drive for my laptop, so I'm not going to rip that shit, and it's freaking overly complicated for a lot of people. Even with a tutorial how to do it, it's still a pain in the ass. The thing is, everybody's going to jump in my comment section and scream at me because I think emulation's a great thing to save games, and a lot of companies are against it. Well, if you're not going to port your shit to your newer consoles, then people are going to do it for you. They're literally going to make an emulator, and they're going to be like, quote unquote, oh, you need to, freaking not, it's not piracy if people are literally ripping games and putting up on the internet for the public. It isn't even stealing. If people are willing to rip games or even translate them from Japanese to English for people to play, it's technically not even freaking stealing because they're willing to put a copy for the public. And these emulating discords are fucking ridiculous in this regard. That one of my friends sent me a copy of Resistance Fall of Man, an ISO file. And it did have some hiccups from his ripped disc because his disc was kind of damaged. And they immediately said it was, quote unquote, downloaded online, which it wasn't. And I told my friends, and they're like, oh, you should legitimately rip your files. Why the fuck do you make emulators for and then frickin' reprimand people for wanting to preserve games? It gets freaking ridiculous at this point that even emulator designers are like, oh, you shouldn't download ISOs or BIOSes. You should literally rip everything from your console. Even if you don't know how to, there's guides online. But not everybody can follow these guides, and not everybody has the technical know-how. And it really, really annoys me that emulation discords who've made these emulators don't support, emulation and support, all these old games that are kind of, getting forgot by the lost of time. And you can argue with me that they make, freaking backwards compatible ports or remasters. Nothing's ever gonna beat the original, no matter how much you fucking dust it up and make it shine. The original always is gonna play better than a remaster most of the time. And there's something more authentic about playing the original. Like, don't get me wrong, I like remasters of some games, but they've been shitting out more remasters for the past few freaking years, quite a few years, than anything else. Like, a few years right after, freaking Destroy Humans 1, the second one, the best game in the franchise, finally got a remaster. And hell, the first game holds up pretty damn well. I'm just really upset that a lot of people are always against emulation and always against, the preservation of gaming. And it's not just preservating stuff. It's for people that can't afford these older consoles. And you can argue with me, oh, PlayStation 1s and, PS1s and PSXs and Xboxes and all these other consoles are fairly cheap. Online, I'm like, yeah, they're either cheap, basically used, or they don't even work at all. So, emulating them on a really good computer is the best way for people to experience stuff. And I really wish the Discord communities of these said emulators would support this, but they're a stickler and they have stuff shoved up their ass all the frickin' time. And it's really annoyed me to the point where when I went into their Discord and they legitimately said in their rules, oh, if you talk about, ripped ISOs from websites and stuff, oh, you're shunned, blah, 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 we're gonna label you this, that, and the other. And I'm just sitting there, are you fucking kidding me? I bet you a half of those people in that frickin' Discord have not ripped stuff straight from their discs and have literally downloaded stuff on a website and they're just staying quiet about it. And it's full of hypocrisy. That's why I'm against, these Discords and stuff like that, because they shit on people and they attack people that download ISOs. If a person, as I said before, if a person is willing to rip an ISO and post it up from the public, it's not technically stealing because they're sharing it and they're giving people permission to use said license, use said game. Yes, it's made by the company, and it technically would be quote-unquote stealing, but if you paid the money to own the disc, you own that game. And you know what? Sony and Xbox and a lot of other corporations don't give a shit. They actually encourage it for people to preserve stuff. And then you got Nintendo that screams at everybody that posts music or something of theirs on their on YouTube, or against ROM emulation. You don't see Xbox and freaking PlayStation or whatever freaking attacking fans. Because you know what? They're so busy with their quote-unquote exclusives that they don't give a fuck. They're old titles, they're old news. It's not making them money anymore. Microsoft rather have the preservation of games, and I'm not trying to console war here in this video. I'm just saying that Xbox and Microsoft just hold this kind of stuff dear and letting people do this shit. Where Nintendo is like, oh, you shall not rip our games and put them on a website. And I'm just sitting here like, what the fuck, Nintendo? Like, this is the way you're gonna preserve your shit. And I'm not talking about, let's make a subscription service and make people pay $20 a month to play classic titles. And I'm like, yeah, where I could just boot my computer up and play Earthbound and stream it. Yes, I paid for the subscription fee. Yes, I'm a whatever. But I was going through a rough time in my life, to be honest. One of my friends died in a car wreck, and Earthbound came out at the right time to help me cope. So, paying for that subscription service to play it on my TV, because my computer was, my old desktop is pretty old and didn't have an HDMI port, so I wouldn't have been able to stream it to my TV anyway. So, it helped me cope with my friend's death. So, yeah, I'm not trying to, ask for sympathy or anything, but it was the only time Nintendo's Super Nintendo lineup actually did something nice. And it felt like to me, it felt like Shigeru Miyamoto felt my pain, and like, you know what? Let's release Earthbound. Someone in the world is probably going through a really rough time and whatnot. That's just how I see it. But back to the topic at hand before I got into something really sappy and sad. That emulation is what's gonna save gaming. It's what's going to preserve it forever. Long as people make emulators, as long as people rip ISOs, gaming will be foreverly eternal. And you know what? PCs run these games better than the original hardware. Hell, I'm playing my games at a really high frame rate, like 60 FPS to a higher resolution on a lot of these PlayStation emulators. And yes, PlayStation the emulators do have their problems with certain games, but if you tweak the settings enough, you can fix that. Emulators are not perfect, but they're the best way to preserve and save gaming and have a lot of fun. This has been Elizabeth Venomclaw, and this has been my rant about why emulation and the ripping of ISOs and files for said emulation is a good thing. It just annoys the hell out of me that people don't support this kind of stuff.